All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Eve and Helen. I'm so really honored just to talk to you both about such a important topic. I'm already getting emotional because myself included, and probably every single person who's going to watch this or listen to this is going to know someone or have experienced cancer
Mm.
in some way in their life. Um, and as a Reiki practitioner, and as a teacher as well, I think it's really beneficial for us to have just awareness around um, speaking to you, Eve, around being an actual patient of cancer, and also Helen, so excited to talk to you about being someone who practices with cancer patients as well. Um, and just having that awareness, because I think so many of us will at some point um, either have a client or a student who, or themselves, who may experience cancer as well. And I think just having that level of awareness and understanding can really help us, and also instills some more confidence that we can make a decision about whether or not we want to practice with people who are going through that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean we have to, but you can definitely make that decision and have that real understanding about whether it's right for you or not. Um, and the other thing that the other key takeaway from today is also that this isn't just what we're going to talk about today, isn't just limited to cancer. It's really applicable to so many different chronic illnesses, challenges that people face in their day-to-day life. So, um, having said all of that, I'm going to pass over to Eve and Helen as well, just to introduce themselves. So Eve, can you share a little bit about yourself and your story?
I can indeed. So my name is Eve Milford, and I am a Reiki practitioner, Reiki master, somatic attachment therapist, sex, love, and relationship coach, and I'm going through a bit of a transition at the moment with all of that. So yeah, the cancer journey was a beautiful initiation into probably bigger things than I ever imagined it would be. Yeah, so that's me. I do have a business called Ever Healing, uh, and again, that's all in transition phase at the moment. Everything's moving to a different evolution as I move through this cancer journey that I've had.
Amazing. And you just raised such a good point that, you know, as you're going through such a huge life transition, you change, and so does your business, and the evolution of, everything that you are, and everything that you even your desires and what you want to do. And yeah, so, and your dreams and everything is just in transition with you. So, yeah, I love that. And as a witness, I can't wait to see it all. Helen.
Hi, my name is Helen Bertuna, and I'm also a Reiki practitioner and Reiki master, which transformed me in so many ways. Currently, I am also a qualified Qigong instructor. I have been involved with Macaulay House, which is my volunteer gig that I love, and I do elements of Qigong and Reiki there. And I intend to upscale the Reiki. Apparently, they're very interested in doing Reiki at Macaulay, so the house that a refugee for women fleeing domestic violence. And then I have been volunteering at the Geelong Cancer Centre. So it's at the Geelong Hospital. It's called the Andrew Love Wellness Lounge, where I've been teaching Qigong and also taking 2 patients for Reiki as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I've been at this moment. But
Amazing.
loving, I've got 2 healing spaces, one in Melbourne and one in Ocean Grove.
Amazing, Helen. Absolutely amazing. So we'd like to start the discussion just talking to Eve as someone who's experienced cancer, as both a patient, but also as a Reiki student, Reiki practitioner, Reiki master, and obviously what comes with Reiki usually is another world with lots of other tools included, and it opens us up. It's certainly not limited to just Reiki as a modality. And so Eve also has so many other modalities that she works with, and I'd love you to just talk about your relationship with those as well throughout your cancer journey too, as well as whatever else you would like to share.
Yeah, so I think I'll start off with maybe the diagnosis, because I think that's a really important piece to start off with as well, because during that time I really didn't feel like there was a lot of support for me, and I really struggled with that. Sorry, starting early. So I basically was having heart palpitations, and you wouldn't have thought the cancer that I had would happen that way. But I'm also a women's pelvic health specialist, and I learned about the hierarchy of healing and what the body actually can tell us. And I had ignored some signals previously from my body, and what happens is it moves through stages of the body. So we go through the pelvic area, the gut, to the heart, to the brain, and what we're trying to do is protect the brain. But I missed signals, and my heart told me that I had cancer by the heart palpitations. Basically, I had low iron. The doctor, thank goodness, was so curious about wanting to find out why I was having blood loss, not just because of my age and putting it down to menopause. I'll come to that in a bit. So I had some further testing, and then she asked me the ultimate question, which is a question I ask my own clients, and that is, where do you feel it is in your body? And I said, I think it's in my gut. And she said, okay, well, let's start there, and then we'll see if it's not there, we'll explore other places. And I went for a colonoscopy 2 weeks later, and at that appointment, they told me there and then that I had colon cancer. And that got the ball rolling, not as quickly as it was supposed to, but during that time, it was really hard, because you're wondering where else it is in your body. You're wondering if it's, every niggle, every pain, you kind of sit there and think, is that cancer? Is it there as well? What about here? And, I was so convinced it was throughout my whole body. And that wasn't the case, which is, obviously wonderful news. So ended up having surgery to remove that mass, that tumour, which meant having a subtotal colectomy, which is basically about 70% of my colon, my large bowel being removed. And then they just fix you up a different way. And, during that time as well, I still had to work throughout all of this. I still had to work, and I think a lot of people don't realise that. So it's not just the stress of having cancer, it's also financials. It's also, emotionally has a toll, obviously mentally. So it's not just the physical aspect as well, like you still have all of that layered on top. I panicked constantly about money and how I was going to make money for when I really was, potentially very, very unwell. So I had to take 2 weeks off of work in recovery, again, constantly thinking about money, but my work was really, really good and very kind to me. And so I managed to get through that. And then I was told, so originally I was diagnosed with stage 2, so different tiers of cancer. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and they put me in stage 2 tier 4 of it, which meant it was on the brink of turning into stage 3, which is where it is found in the lymph nodes. And that's when it can start to move around the body and move into different organs. So it was very close to coming out of the wall of the large bowel. And so it was found just in time. But because I was diagnosed at stage 2, tier 4, I really didn't think I needed chemo until they said they'd taken out my lymph nodes and there was 41 removed in total. And normally they only test 12, apparently, when they're doing these tests to see where else it is, if it's, anywhere it's spread in the body. And there was a tiny, tiny trace of cancer near one of my lymph nodes. It wasn't in it, but it was sort of around it. And it was enough for them to kind of say, let's do chemo. So then I was moved into stage 3 cancer diagnosis. So again, I had to wrap my head around that because that was quite difficult to navigate when it moves to such a different diagnosis, when you've been told it's one thing and then it's changed to another. And so again, and I had to navigate the chemo thing as well, because I was adamant. I was just like, no, there's no way I'm going to need chemo. No way. Like I really, really, really believed that. And I still think that was true. I still think my body was still letting me know. And I still think my intuition was right on the money. But I think it was just, making sure they were ticking a box, making sure that it really was gone. I've heard of it as being called mop-up chemo, where they just mop up the tiny traces of cancer. So again, being in the world and the industry that I live in, I had to then go through this inner turmoil of why don't you do it naturally, the industry that you work in, the well-being, do it naturally. And there was this real battle that I had to, you don't have a lot of time. You don't have a lot of time to think about these things. And, and I really didn't have anyone to talk to about it either. It was, your brain and your mind and your mental state is just doing different things. You're in a different space. And not only that, is they talk to you about your fertility as well. And being 43 at the time, I still thought, I still have a window. I still have a window of opportunity. It's not all left me. But then, of course, you have to think about that journey too. And that was another thing that I had to consider, because they couldn't do anything for me because of my age. So couldn't store my eggs, couldn't do anything. So the only option was to cross my fingers and hope that I didn't go into early menopause, or what it's called chemo-induced menopause. And especially, and this can happen to any woman during, who is menstruating. So it's not just my age, it can happen to a 20-year-old. And I think, again, that's something that really wasn't supported either. So I'm saying all these things because I find them really important, especially because I wasn't aware of it, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of it. And it's just another one of those things that you can bring into a practice for Reiki. And all these things that I'm talking about, I'm going to be creating lots of wonderful tools and support for women going through this as well, which I can't wait to do. So that was another thing to navigate, fertility, and like closing the door on that. It was like a death, and like it really is just like dancing with death continuously, and not in the way that we initially think that we're gonna, when it comes to cancer, like there's a death of quite a few things. There's a death of relationships, and and I started getting my perpetrators started contacting me because all of a sudden I think they might have felt guilty. And then again, I had to navigate that. Like I couldn't hold their guilt and I couldn't hold their emotions just to make them feel better. So, there was a lot to go through. And one of the things that happened was that I really disconnected from my tools. I really disconnected from Reiki when I started chemo. So, you know, cancer and chemo are very different things. And I think because chemo does come into play, obviously, when you have cancer, it's the only time that it does, that we always associate it with that. But, you know, a lot of people don't even have cancer, but they're taking it because they've been told to, or because it's mop up. And that has such an effect on the body, as everybody knows, and it is different for everyone. So for me, I didn't lose my hair because the chemo I was on, it had been re-engineered not to do that. So, you know, when we look at cancer research, I think it's not only just how can we prevent cancer, but I think a lot of money goes into re-engineering these medicines as well, which again only came to sort of light for me when I was dealing with it and in it, and seeing the effects. And I have to say, I feel very lucky in my experience, because I only had to have 8 rounds, which is 6 months, which felt like a drop in the water in comparison to what some other people have to go through with it. So I do feel very thankful for that. And you know what, at this moment in time, as I sit here, it all feels like it didn't even happen. It feels like, because it all happened very quickly. And then with the chemo, my hands and my feet really started to get painful. I had an infusion, and I already knew, and I'd even said to Loretta, my body's not going to do this. My body's not going to take it. And it didn't with the infusion, and I ended up in emergency because of the reaction that I had to it. And so they decided to not do the infusion, which then meant I had to take the oral tablets for a lot longer. And of course, the more you take of chemo, the bigger the side effects and the more painful. So, because I was originally supposed to only do 4, so it doubled the time that I had to do it. But in that time, I really did feel disconnected from my tools, and even card reading, and I love reading my cards. I love it. It's like, it brings me joy to feel connected to something other, and, you know, something greater, and universe. And I just had this real death again with the tools. And you know, thankfully and gradually that kind of all came back. And one thing that and the other thing was as well, is that I kept saying that I was toxic, which I was told not to say. I kept saying I'm toxic, and I think that's why I disconnected. And as strange as it sounds, because we all know that Reiki goes where it needs to go, and it's, you know, and it's love and all of those things, I just felt like I couldn't hold it, I couldn't contain it in my body, because I felt like I was toxic. And so when you're going through all of this, you know, the other thing that it brought up as well is that I am in recovery from drugs and alcohol addiction. Is it brought up a lot of memories, because taking the chemo would make you feel like sometimes that you'd been on a bender for like weeks. And so a lot of that came back as well, a lot of the memories of addiction, but I wasn't getting the high from it. I was only getting the lows. But, you know, and that took me down this rabbit hole of the numbness that I felt in my body. And I kind of, you know, I suppose I was going there again with that. And thankfully, you know, like my whole journey with Reiki was when I came out of, or when I got sober, about 3 years after getting sober, I started doing Reiki, and I met Loretta and started using crystals and started using Reiki, and that got me back into my body. And so even though I had the answer, it just wasn't something that I I wanted to do. And I feel like it was just because I felt toxic, and I felt like these things that I was touching, I was making more toxic. So these sacred things, I felt like I wasn't making them sacred anymore. So again, another death of how I used my tools, another death of, like the desire to want to use them as well. That just completely left me. And it wasn't because I felt angry at it or anything like that. It just purely was like I felt like during that period that I couldn't touch it. And also, like, my hands were very painful as well at that time. So it just felt redundant, I suppose, a redundant thing to do. And then thankfully I was having a chat with someone else who was in the Nourished Energy community, and we spoke about crystals and perhaps using crystals with my chemo. And that's what I started doing. So I did grid work with my chemo. Every single time I'd start a new round, I would create a new grid. And let me tell you the difference that made. Not only did it make it a ritual for me and a little bit sacred, it made me feel like when I was taking the chemo, I was taking that little bit of, rose quartz or amethyst or whatever it was that was in my grid that week. And then I started going, right, what do I want in my body this week? What crystal would I like inside of me this week? And like the very last one, I had tiger's eye and red garnet, and like really made it so juicy that I had all these beautiful things. And, and that really made it a lot easier. And then I think we had like a call, and I hopped on the mastership call, and I accepted and I received. And and I think that's what it is. I'd had so much going on. You're in the hospital pretty much. I lived there for a little bit, and you get needles put in you. You've got all these things pumping around your body, and they're doing blood tests constantly, having CT scans, and your body doesn't feel like yours at that point. It feels like it's just been given away. And like I can go back to the addiction and the piece of that as well, because that's how I felt then too. I felt like I had just given my body away, and I was just numb. And so, when I reflect on it now and just sitting here talking about it, there's so much duality in that, in the addiction and the chemo, and it was just bringing back those feelings. So it's not just you're going through the treatment, there's other things that arise. And with the Reiki, it makes you forget just for a little bit. And I think that's the biggest part, is being in the care of someone else that's going to love you, and that's going to allow you to have that love flow through your body. And that's the beauty of it. And and I just, don't be scared to be working with people who have chronic illness, or there are things probably that I'm sure we're going to cover today. But yeah, that's my story.
Oh my gosh. Eve, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, it's amazing just to see, just to be here with you. Oh, I'm gonna get yeah, it's really special. And just to hear you talking about it from such an empowered state, like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's amazing. You said at the beginning, you called it a beautiful initiation.
Yeah.
Which is just it's so powerful. And I think, you also touched on the fact that you were saying things like, I'm toxic, and like, gosh, our words are just so meaningful, right? In shifting our state. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit on that point, that you felt like, not just you were saying it, but you really you felt like that. You felt like you were toxic. I feel like even people who don't go through a series of taking medications and things like that also feel like they're toxic, right? At points in their life. I certainly remember times in my life where I have absolutely not felt worthy, right? Which is essentially what you're saying. I don't feel worthy to connect with something so sacred, which is what you were talking about. And I love the idea of going and using the crystals with something outside of you. So the crystal itself is the tool being outside of you, and connecting with something like the medicine, or like, whatever it is that you're using. I love that idea as kind of a starting point, because as we know, Reiki is really something that is inside of you, right? It's something that allows you to really connect to that part of you that is the universe, right? So I can understand that sometimes that can be a bit of a stretch, and I absolutely have had moments like that, and still do have moments like that, when there's a lot going on and it feels like a stretch to connect with something within me. So it's like, what can I do as a bridge to that, right? How can I get to that point? And crystals are such a beautiful tool to help us get to that point. And I just wanted to point that out, because I think that sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need, and when you don't have even a capacity to connect with that tool, being able to receive from somebody else who can be that tool for you is so powerful. And like you just said, it's when you can't hold that for yourself, like being able to lean on someone or something else to hold you is can make such a difference, right? As we've seen, like as you've experienced, and as I think many of us have experienced before. So I think that's such an important message from a practitioner's perspective too, and also as the recipient. Like, it's okay for you not to be Reiki. Sometimes it's so okay, because you're a human being and you're going to have lots of times where you're not Reiki. But also having that courage to just go, and that compassion for yourself, like, you know what, I'm not there today, or I'm not there right now in this moment. But I do have somebody that I can call on if it's okay for me to ask for help or use something else, or whatever it might be. And as the practitioner, how powerful that we also get to just trust in that and say, you know what, I just need to show up and just hold them and just love them. Just love them.
And that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Special. So special. Helen, I'd love to hear from you now. as someone who is working with cancer patients. So I'd love for you to talk more about that.
Like the whole experience blew me away. So initially I thought, I'm going to have to promote Reiki here, because these people won't know what it is. They won't be open to it. It's something so far left of their field. But it just absolutely surprised me that the two women that ran the Cancer Wellness Centre were saying to me, you're booked out. Like, your Reiki sessions are booked out. I'm going, what? So they had to, they sent out emails to the cancer patients saying this was available, and just two people, like individually at a time, and they had to book in. So I called these two beautiful ladies my booking agents, and they were saying, oh, gosh, these people, are so interested in trying Reiki. And I really felt that the fact that they were turning up, even the fact that they were turning up to experience Reiki, was a positive step in their healing journey. They are setting intentions about their own wellness. They would turn up and they would say, I don't know what Reiki is. And so I'd explain a little bit of the history, and then I'd explain what I would be doing with them and how long it would take. And so the wellness centre gave me one of those hospital beds that can go up and down. They said, take what you need, pillows, blankets. So I made sure everything was all set up for these people. I had always took in my own music. I took in crystals as well. The cancer centre people already had diffusers going for me, so the room smelled nice. So, they were so supportive in this way that it was a joy to go in and do this. And, like the response from many of these cancer patients was immense. It just varied. One lady who had a tumor removed from her brain came to me for Reiki, and she said, my head just hurts. And I said, all right, we'll go through the Reiki. And she had been to me before. And at the end of it, I said, how's your head? And she said, oh my God, my head feels better. And I'm like, oh, the surprise elements. Another cancer patient who I put a rose quartz on her heart whilst I was doing my Reiki session with her. She said she just felt this crystal infused all this warmth through her body. She said she didn't want it to end. So I ended up giving her a rose quartz. So, so that was going wonderfully since last September. And then about 2 months ago, I received an email from the volunteer coordinator, because I was doing this all as a volunteer, saying, and I think it's all to do with the legal team, saying they're really worried about me teaching Qigong and doing Reiki because of the personal touch. And I'm like, what? Anyway, again, it was kind of out of my control. So I started sending them, like in Qigong, there's no touch. It's like a yoga teacher. I teach out the front. And as for Reiki, I can do, no touching. It's hands above. And I started sending them tests completed by universities, how Reiki can help cancer patients. And so far, they haven't got back to me, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed about the fact they're probably, not knowing what this is, and also B, worrying about, is there going to be a kickback about, the personal touch aspect. But the people who came to me for Reiki, they went to my booking agents and rebooked pretty much straight away. So what I did do then, I said, you can come to my home, in Ocean Grove or Melbourne, and I'll give them Reiki there. And one of the patients in particular has taken that offer up. But I just found that I was there just holding space for them with love. And I didn't even think about their cancer. As I was doing it, I would do the Reiki as I would anyone else.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Helen. Far out, look at these two inspiring women I get to talk to. It's amazing. The really important thing there is that when we're working with anybody, like we know, right, that just holding that space and connecting with them, it really feels like you are just working soul to soul. Like there
Yeah.
is that connection comes from something that completely transcends this physical realm, and you feel that. So we don't think, you know, there's no need to think about how they're suffering or their pain or what they've done or, you know, anything about this, what they look like. You know, it's got nothing to do with that, and it really is just about being in that space with them and holding it and connecting with them. And oh my gosh, it's really, really beautiful that you've had so many stories that you can talk about now as well.
Yes,
That
yes,
success.
yes. If I don't hear back, and I feel like for me to keep fighting this, I'm putting the wrong energy into it. You know, I'm a volunteer, so I'll let them work all that out. If it's beyond their control, which it probably is, then I'm going to be looking at other avenues. But like I've also heard that Australia is so far behind putting Reiki practitioners into hospitals. I know UK and US, they will employ Reiki practitioners in their hospitals, which is amazing, you know, like, so sometimes I know we probably all have sent Reiki to people in hospitals. A friend of mine had like a huge heart operation, and I was giving her Reiki during the actual operation, which was incredible. But it's slowly getting there. I have hope that, you know, as the studies come through, that Reiki practitioners will be more accepting of this.
I do too, Helen. I've got holding on to hope as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, it's like you said, it's I think we're challenged, you know, just like a lot of other modalities too, and you look back sometimes and can see how far some modalities have come as well, even to be, you know, a lot of them have come pretty far and are now accepted, you know, on private health insurance and things like that. So I think we've got a long way to go, but we just have to trust that we're as long as we can make it accessible, and it's really beautiful that just leading by example and living by example, right? And people who need you are finding you, and they will continue to do so, and really powerful. I also just wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, just to talk a little bit about a study you recently participated in, and some of the things that the researcher was talking to you about. Like I found it so fascinating, and I'm sure others will as well.
Yeah, there's a lady in Sydney who's actually associated with Bond University in Queensland, and she's doing her PhD on Reiki in hospitals. And so she put it out to you, obviously, and then I saw it on the website, so I connected with Sonia, and I was the first person that she actually interviewed for this study. And she just went through, you know, there'd be questions, and she wouldn't really interrupt at that stage. And she said, because it was all being recorded as well. And she had lost her husband to cancer the year before. So that was still very raw in her life. So she was interested to hear my experience, and so I went through the whole journey of, you know, what happened, how I was welcomed into the hospital to do this, and how so many patients would come to me, and how brilliant that was, and also what happened, you know, with the powers to be afterwards. So she sent me some studies actually of how Reiki is important for people suffering with cancer. That that she feels is going to make an impact in hospitals. But I would be very interested to see her final study, because in Australia, I don't think there's a lot happening. So she said she will send me her study once it's completed. Yeah, so I said even the fact that she's doing that is putting an awareness out that, Reiki can be done in hospitals for any ward. Like, imagine going into a children's hospital as a Reiki practitioner. Well, any hospital really, and holding space for these people who are suffering. And at the end of it, she was like, wow, she was pretty amazed with, just the different things that I brought up in my experience. But yeah, again, all these things are starting to happen that I feel that, there's hope.
There's hope. Yeah. Yeah. I love that study is being done like an Australian is leading that study. It's really, really powerful. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. I guess I'd love to probably just end with some tips, I think, and anything else you'd like to share for whether it be someone who is going through cancer themselves, or even, I think sometimes we also forget about the caregivers too. Sometimes it's someone who's close to you who's going through it, and how could you support them too? And also as a practitioner as well. So maybe Eve, would you want to? I might start with you if you've got any tips or things that you would like to share.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things I did forget to mention that I did for myself was I spoke to my cancer. And so I met with her and I formed a relationship with my cancer. In fact, when it came to surgery time, I had to grieve. I had to grieve for the loss of the cancer because, I reflected on that of if you come from the mindset that our trauma is stored within our body, I could certainly, when I look at the metaphysical reason for colon cancer and I read that out, it is like a bio for my past. And so going in and talking with that part, that's what I do with my clients. It's exactly the same thing as we go in and we do parts work, and I also do aspecting, which is with cushions and pillows. So the cancer would be on the pillow and I would go and see the energy of the cancer and talk as if I was the cancer. And that was very freeing. So I know a lot of people as well in the community do different modalities, and that certainly was one. I don't think a lot of people would want to do that. I think it's but you know what, it was so helpful for me. So trying out your different modalities in that way with safety, obviously, around all of that, but going a bit deeper into that space and seeing what that client perhaps would like, and if it's something that they would be open to, and if not, because I know a lot of people say F cancer, but I was kind of saying the opposite of like, you have to love it, you have to love the cancer because it's part of the trauma, it's part of my body, it was part of my organ. I don't know how many years, I suspect I got it in 2019, so it's been with me for that long. So I'd certainly just think about other modalities that you have that you can, maybe use as well. And then, the crystal gridding was amazing. That definitely helped me. And I've got a golden healer, a big giant that was next to my bed the whole time. Actually, it was under my bed for a little bit, and then I moved it and put it next to my bed. And I think just asking, like we normally would any other client, how are you feeling today? Because it's going to be different every single time you see that person. If they're in chemo, if they're going through chemo, they can have something completely different one week, and then the next week it might be something else. So just asking the question of you know, where don't you want me to touch today? Or do you even want me to do that? I can hover, you know, like Helen was saying. So yeah, those are definitely some things.
Eve, I just wanted to jump in because you raise a really good point. I know you talked about this earlier, that sometimes someone will come in and, you know, it's not the physical stuff that they even want to talk about, right? And it's not that stuff that they actually need help with. Yes, maybe they're having, you know, symptoms, or there's effects and side effects and, you know, everything else they're dealing with, they're in pain or whatever it is physically, but sometimes all they need from you is just to be held, because there's so much other stuff that's going on. It's the financial stuff, it's the fear, it's the emotional stuff, it's the relationships. I know that from both ends. You know, as someone who's had people around me with cancer, it can be difficult to even know how, you know, what to say, or how to help them and how to support them. And sometimes on the other end of that, you know, some people don't want certain, they change the way that they want support, or don't want to talk to people. They need to be on their own for a while, and that can be really hard as well. Like, there's so many factors that go into, you know, when you're going through something so huge like a life transition such as cancer. So it's yeah, I love that, even just letting go of any assumptions that it's the physical stuff that is
Yeah.
what they're needing to be met with today, or what they're needing you to see them as. And it's more about just asking them, how can I best support you today?
Yeah.
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 Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I just found there were so many of my Reiki patients that came to see me. I would hear their stories, you know, and I think, oh my God, you know, what they have been through. And yeah, I was just there to listen and support them whichever way they could. So some of you might know that I've produced some cards that help people, you know, cope with anxiety. So a lot of them have ended up with sets of my cards that I just gave them. And yeah, and some of them have said they put them out just to remind themselves of that's where they need to be, or just to improve their mindset on different things. And yeah, but their stories would be so powerful.
Thanks so much, Helen. Eve, did you have anything else that you wanted to share? Otherwise I might.
No, I don't think so. Probably just touching on actually what Helen just said there, and as a practitioner, protecting yourself as well and your boundaries, because there might be some trauma dumping, as Helen just shared. Like, you know, but holding space for that if there is a desire and a need to, but just understanding there's that element as well. So I would definitely go into those sessions, you know, really well grounded, and making sure that you're, you know, you're really open to listening to those stories as well.
A really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I guess it comes back to that, you know, earlier, or as I was saying, it's really up to you as a practitioner to make that choice about whether it is something that you want to hold space for, like with anything, really. And it's also okay to say no, because sometimes we don't have capacity either, if, you know, whatever it is that we're going through too. So it's important that self-care. I just want to share your chameleon cards, Helen. They're so
Thanks.
beautiful. This is one lot, but there's a couple, and they're just gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous. So get in touch with Helen if you'd like to, doing a little promo there. Shameless promo. But they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. And sometimes I think that's just a really good tip too. Sometimes giving someone a takeaway is just a beautiful anchor to that session that they had, a treatment, but it can inspire them with a bit of hope, or remind them that, oh, they had a break from, they got to relax, they got to just, they got to switch off for a little while, or they got to be held. It's safe to be held and receive, and, whatever it is for them. Yeah, it can.
I think that's what frustrates me most of all about like the hospitals, because they're seeing it as like, a woo-woo thing, or it's not physically going to help them though, is it? It's like, but that's not the point. Like, they're being held
Yes,
through this
so much more than
experience and time in their life. Again, emotion, like you can just stop thinking. You can stop thinking, is it somewhere else? You're just receiving, because you're constantly giving. I've got to give my blood here. I've got to do this test here. I've got to, like, constantly for such a long time. And then, then you've got the intrusion of medicine and chemo and, whatever it is. Obviously, as Loretta said at the beginning, we're talking about cancer because that's the common denominator here, but chronic illness and stuff like that, it's, it can get so tiring and exhausting, and all you need is just someone to hold you for a little bit, just for a little bit.
yeah.
Looking at it from a completely different way, and that's not it.
And the key point there is that we know that the more that you feel safe and held and loved, and the more that you feel in an optimal state, a high state, like that is when the physical does heal, So it's really beautiful.
Absolutely, because like, I didn't realize, I obviously did not know that I was in survival mode. And I must, the cancer, I believe the cancer started in 2019. And that meant I hadn't been long sober since alcohol and drugs, which meant it didn't give me a lot of time to understand. I started learning about my nervous system, regulating myself, when I'd done my course in sexuality to become a sex, love and relationship coach, which was a year-long journey. Well, it was over a year. It was about 5 years. And I think that really helped me in that time. And again, it is about that safety in the body, and just being out, not being in survival mode for that moment, because you're being held, your nervous system is being nourished.
Yes.
And that is just so important.
Oh, that's a really nice way to think about it. Your nervous system being nourished. I love that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
One thing that the two women that found, as the people were finishing my Reiki session and walking out of the room, they would then do like a little mini interview with these people to see, how they are. And after I'd finished, they'd say, oh my gosh, that person just came out floating, and, or this person came out, was happy that she cried. And so, there was so much feedback here, and it was all positive. So, yeah, I think, I always said to whoever was on in my healing space, that there's nothing for you to do here, just receive.
Oh,
Kept it that simple.
those words, how powerful is that? There's nothing for you to do here.
Yeah, just receive. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Goosebumps.
I know. Oh, I just want to put that on my wall. That is so beautiful. Just for my own practice. I love that so much.
Do it.
It's so beautiful. I think the only thing I would also just like to share is I remember a while ago practicing on a child who was a cancer patient, and it was hard, obviously, to practice on her physically. So I would work out times with her parents to actually go over to her house, and I would play with her, and we would be playing, but I would also be practicing Reiki on like her. She had like a comforter, like she would have in her cot, and I would be just facilitating Reiki and connecting with her comforter, and also with her toys and just around the house and things like that, and also with the mum. That was really, really important too as a primary caregiver. So yeah, I just wanted to share that example as, you know, what sometimes you're not always able to directly be in contact with someone, or they're not physically able to receive Reiki as well, in the sort of the normal, or how you know, traditional kind of sense. But there's so many ways. So just obviously there's by distance, but just being really open to thinking about other ways that you know, it can happen. Just remembering that it's just about the energy work. So it's infinite, you know, and there's no limitation to how you can practice. But yeah, that's basically, I just wanted to share that. This has been such an amazing conversation. I think it's really, really important and so special, you know, no matter what stage you are, or, you know, where you are, you know, whether you're working through and have experienced cancer, or whether you are, or another illness or anything like that, or again, as a practitioner or student or teacher as well. And yeah, it's just a really important conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Ellen and Eve, and just so inspiring, both of you. And it's a real honor to know you both.
To share.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad we had this conversation. It was beautiful.
So beautiful.